new trainer's reference guide and the new field guide. It's just been put out. We have the 6 technology keys. We can call them the Tech 6. Maybe that's an easy way to remember them. The Tech 6. Okay? No plowing? We've discussed this. We saw a lot about that practically on the runoff. We've just had a session on God's blanket, covering 100% cover with 2.5 centimeters thick. We'll discuss a bit more about biodiversity through rotations and other methods. The other methods being relay cropping and cover cropping and rotations within rotations. Feeding plants from the top, ensuring canopy cover, and permanence. I wanted to kind of go over these a little bit. Okay? So those are technology keys. These are the practical outworkings of the heart that God's given us, the wisdom He's imparted to us through His Word and His ways, and now we need to have methods into which to apply these things. Where did we get these ideas? Where did we get these ideas?
The forest.
The forest.
And from God.
From God. Can also be from other natural environments, okay? Other ecosystems. Generally use these principles, okay? So we want to take these principles and we want to put them into practice on our farms, in our fields, okay? So let's look at these 3. So in farming God's way, we feed from the surface. How do we do that? Well, first of all, Griffin mentioned that when you put God's blanket, what happens? Here's the blanket, then slowly it starts to rot, right? More leaves fall, you put more blanket, it forms this nice layer of, maybe we can call this humus, rotted or rotting organic matter, which is in a state of being available to plants, plant available nutrients, okay? They're stable, they don't quickly run away. They don't get washed away, they don't evaporate, they don't get exposed to sun and break down. They're quite stable and they're there for the plant to use. So that's the basic way that you feed plants. Now this takes a long time to develop this kind of strong level of humus which has high in nutrient content, okay? We want to benefit from this, but this is not enough to feed your plant straight up when you start farming, okay? It will assist and help, but it's not the main form of feeding. But this is definitely, you'll find your plants. We found maize roots traveling. We pulled one up, just traveling between the rows. I think it was like a meter long, just moving under here. Nice hairs on it, feeding just under the blanket. If you have a banana plantation, you pull back the mulch, you'll find the roots just right under the mulch. Right under the mulch, okay? So this is definitely, especially in a perennial crop, or when you get into growing things like plantation crops or orchard crops, this is going to be very important to have this in place. One of the worst things you can do in coffee, bananas, fruit trees is to shade between the trees. Everything should be 100% mulched, and it should be mulched all the time, and over history or over time, and you'll find this layer of humus building up, okay? So if you want a good principle for all your gardening, all your farming, even your tree crops, we need this for feeding. Then what do we do for our other crops? Well, we dig planting stations, right? Or furrows, like we've showed you. which basically put the ash, input some little bit of soil, and then we'll plant the seed just above that. Okay, it's not exactly on the surface, but it's near the surface. Okay? That's very good. Now, when we get into vegetables, the key to, we're not going deep into this, this would be a completely different workshop, and vegetables, if I would have given you a certificate, it would have been kind of like giving you something, maybe you finished primary in this 3 days. But to go to secondary, or secondary is kind of like vegetables, because its level of learning and implementation is at a different level. The foundation for vegetables is good compost. Vegetables they have weak and shallow roots, and they need a lot of nutrients. So we feed them with quality compost. Quality compost, let me ask you, if you want something good, if I want a good cake, a good loaf of bread, what do I need? Maybe I visited this friend's home. He made me a really good mandazi. I said, oh, I love those mandazi. I want to go back to Canada and make mandazi like yours. What will I ask him for? Recipe. Okay. Because I want to repeat what he gave me. Okay, it's the same with compost. If you want high quality compost, it needs good ingredients, and it needs a method of how to mix them so that I get the same good result. Okay? We're not going to go deep into composting right now. We'll do a little bit of a practical tomorrow. But vegetables, if we do vegetables, we concentrate so much on composting. And so much of vegetables, we do what we call surface composting. We simply have a channel or a bandwidth of compost that goes along the row. The bandwidth will depend how many rows of that crop. If it was onions, maybe 3 rows, or carrots, 3 or 4 rows, and we have a band of surface compost. Okay? It's just that is on top of the soil. Before that, we have done fracturing with the fork. We don't invert the soil, we put the fork in and go backwards, and that's to bring our soil, it's like fast forwarding it to a mature soil, like it would be in a forest. Soft and penetrable to a deep layer into the profile. Then we put compost on the surface. The seed or seedling is planted just in or on the compost and feeds on that compost, and its roots eat from that compost, which is, again, the thickness will also depend on the crop, how much it needs. But just understand that we put compost on the surface of the soil. The compost is put exactly when we're going to plant. It's not like the planting station, which is done before the season. Vegetables, you understand, they're intense. We put plants in, we take them out, we rotate. We're hopefully we're doing our vegetable farming continuously with no breaks. Okay? And it's intensive, it's on usually smaller areas with continual cultivation. But the foundation to vegetable farming in Farming God's Way is good compost and surface composting. So that's how we implement this idea of feeding from the surface. Again, it's not to say that plants don't put roots anywhere else, but primarily if we can feed them from the surface, they'll do very well. Okay? So that's feeding plants from the top. So we just need to accomplish that. All right? Now, people may say, well, I put manure on the top. Well, remember, when you put manure on open, exposed soil, it can get washed away by the rain. The sun can the UV rays can break down the organic matter, cause it to decay quickly, and the nitrogen will evaporate in volatile forms and go away into the atmosphere. Nitrogen is part of the atmosphere. It wants to go back to the atmosphere. Okay? So it needs to be covered. Here, the compost is also very valuable. It's also could be subject to the sunlight and the breakdown, but remember, soon after planting, we bring the mulch near to the base of the plant. Okay, so it's protected by God's blanket. All right, so that's why we do what we do. And when you discover that plants feed from the surface, then you'll be wholeheartedly implementing things like God's blanket and making good high-quality compost and feeding from the surface. Okay, ensuring canopy closure. Recently, just last week, I was in Rwanda. The farmers implementing are doing really well, and we were in a maize field. The canopy closure wasn't bad. Sorry, you had a question?
Yeah, before you move away from that topic,
Yeah, sorry.
there's this idea that is coming every now and then about the use of the ash.
Yeah.
I'm asking this because of I have a small garden in Nairobi, and it has been proving that the plant's not doing well, and one of the suspects is that the soil is a bit acidic.
Yeah.
Now, if you talk of ash in Nairobi, it's a strange whatever, but at least there are some garbages or whatever that is being burnt and there's ash. So is that specific ash or is it
Okay,
ash of
good
any?
question. Yeah, and I didn't mention because I was concentrating more on the compost. But still, ash is actually put just below the compost. But good question on the ash. So ash should be wood ash. It shouldn't be from garbage because there's chemicals in there that wouldn't be good for your garden. Should be wood ash. Charcoal ash also counts because it's also wood. So wood ash is good. It should really be from wood ash, and it shouldn't be from wood that was treated with a chemical. Okay. Yes, so agricultural lime is also available. Please don't use building lime. It's the wrong chemical. It will mess up your soil chemically and physically. So use agricultural lime. I'm quite sure it's quite available here in yeah. Yeah. And the rates, I'm not going to go into the rates and how to put it. That's given, but ash should be put before you put any input. And you'll find around many homesteads that often people plant a little bit of maize or a few vegetables around the homestead, and usually those do quite well. Number one, they've been sweeping all the leaves, and they sweep them into these little kind of gardens that maybe children have made or you've planted around the homestead. And then there's also ash. Whoever's cooking, they just throw the ashes into that little garden, and you find that around the home, these gardens do quite well. And that's one of the reasons, is they're fed, they're mulched, and there's ash. It's not really in the right system, but they do have all the ingredients. So they're benefiting. Yeah. So, good question. Another question? Yeah.
When you're using God's blanket in terms of feeding the plants, can you then also use things like supplements, like you're spraying foliar supplements, or you're using some of these other organic supplements?
There's nothing wrong with spraying some organic things. Some have other living organisms that will stimulate your soil. There wouldn't be a problem with that. And there's also benefit to putting branches of leguminous plants as mulch. They would also help increase the soil fertility. So that's all fine. No problem there. Of course, we would like you to stay away from chemicals, but natural things that you want to add, there's no problem there. Yeah, as long as it accomplishes the idea of blanket, and it will break down. But most of these things that fix nitrogen they don't have a lot of carbon, so they do break down quite quickly. They have a lot of nitrogen. Yeah, another?
Maybe in general, I like the idea of focusing on small scale.
Yeah.
But could you at some point also explain different methods on how to apply for bigger or big scale?
So, still, for large scale, still everything can be, all the planting stations, all that can still be used. In fact, so when, who here shared the history? Was it Griffin? It was you, yeah. So we said that, I'm not going to get it exactly right, but the used hose up to I think around 600 hectares. They had teams of people of 100, I think 100 people during planting. That was their biggest labor need, was during planting, because obviously you have to get lots of things planted quickly. So it's doable by hand tools. You just need good organization. But there are tools. I mean, there are zero-till, minimal-till pieces of equipment that you can buy. North America, ours are too big. You wouldn't want to look there. South Africa have minimal-till or zero-till implements that will plant into God's blanket in 2 or 4 rows behind a smaller tractor. So the important thing isn't the implement. The important thing is that you accomplish what we are trying to accomplish. Do you get the principle done, and is it practiced well? So can you get the seed and the nutrient into the soil, and in a way that it will germinate, come out? Can it get through the mulch? So there are small tools. There is also a dibbler. You've seen these things. It drops a couple seeds along sometimes with some fertilizer. That could also be done. The problem with that is you have no way of getting bulk organic material into your soil. You can put some diammonium phosphate and a couple seeds. You can try it, it may work, but we like the idea of building up our soil with all this organic component in the planting stations or surface composting. Yeah, well, it's basically wherever your dibble point is. So those are useful, but we really want to increase the organic matter in our fields right now. That's really a big thing, and you're not going to do that with a dibbler. So really, it's open-ended. Like, the answer is really any appropriate implement that is not going to plow. It's going to put your seed in the ground through the mulch or in between the mulch, and it's viable. It's something that will work, and you get good germination. It works, and it can be pulled by an implement, whether it's a 2-wheel tractor or a 4-wheel tractor, that is affordable to someone. So really, Farming Godspeed doesn't say, oh, you shouldn't use machines or you shouldn't do this. That's not really our concern. Our first concern is the poor, so we know that a hoe should be the main, So we start from there. But, I mean, hey, if you're a farmer, in the United States or Brazil or somewhere, and you have 500 acres and you have a tractor, well, put your plow away, but there's equipment that you can use to get all this done, accomplishing the principles. So we don't really get hung up on the tool, per se. We just want you to implement. But it's geared towards the hoe, because that's what, around the world, that's what the developing nations tend to use as a tool. Other nations do use a spade, so you'd have to make some alterations to use a spade. Some don't use a hoe, they use a spade. But you still accomplish the same tasks, but with a spade. Okay, there's people who have, maybe you have some tribes here, they have a hoe on the end of a pole, and they dig like this. Yeah. Their actual way of digging is actually better, because if you that angle of that hoe just cuts the grass. You don't dig deep. So we have people in northwestern Uganda that cultivate with this long pole with a hoe, which is just straight, right? It's just cutting like a knife. Yes?
I'd like to ask a question about what would you advise for a virgin land that you're clearing for the first time?
Okay, the question is what to do about virgin land when you're clearing for the first time. So the great news there is that you have a great starting point, because the soil is in a good condition, you've got organic matter. The process is still basically the same. It's shave whatever's growing there, the bushes, the shrubs, cut down anything big. If there's really nice, valuable trees, then maybe leave 1 or 2, appreciating that underneath them nothing will grow, and just basically let everything lie down. You're likely not to have to use ash. Yeah. Yeah, some of the grasses.
So I'm just wondering.
Some of the grasses are quite strong, the root system, and they could be difficult to keep them from regrowing. So then, in those cases, I would go a little bit deeper and make sure you get the root system out. So then, shaving may not do it. I would go a little bit deeper and get the root system out. You're only going, the instruction be to whoever's doing it, is you're only going as deep to get that grass uprooted. It's not, we're not back to plowing now.
Yeah.
We're just getting those thick rhizomes, those thick roots out. And we're not getting every root out, we're getting that main growing area right underneath the growing point. Okay? The other option, if you have lots of mulch, is to smother mulch. Shave it and smother mulch with 10 centimeters, then that would really suppress that grass quite well. But then you would need a bulk of material needed. But very good question. Yeah, I had this similar situation in Canada with a garden with very heavy grasses, and they wanted to keep coming up. So then you really do need to dig a little bit deeper and get that strong rooting system out. Anyone else in farming guys have an experience that way? Pretty much similar, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think there is this movie called Back to Eden, and they
Yeah.
put some newspaper before they mulch. Maybe that helps to kill nuts.
Yeah, again, it's back to the same idea. It's like, it's a great idea, but we just not going to promote it because newspapers are usually for sale here, both in terms of when they're new and when they're used, because they're used as a packaging material. So then so it's a great idea if you can use it and afford it. But yeah, even the cardboard is in some ways better at that initial time of getting these strong roots from coming through. But then they still need to often be weighted with other material. But generally want to stay with materials which would already be available to you. Griffin, you had a point? No. Okay, I think we... One last question, we keep going.
Yes, sorry, Uncle, please, I think I missed something on key number 4.
Yeah.
Feeding plants from the top, it's not very clear to me. What the leaves top, the roots where?
Okay, top of the soil.
Ah,
Sorry, maybe I'm presuming an obvious thing, but maybe it's not obvious. So, top of the soil profile.
that's now.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, no, it's a very good question. There's no bad question. The only bad one is the one you don't ask, right? So, yeah, that's a good question because, yeah, I'm just trying to say top of the soil profile, right? We have God's blanket, then it's rotting,
That's okay now.
it's rotted, that's the profile that we're looking at, we're at the top of that profile, okay? Good. Thanks for the clarification. Okay, let's keep going. Ensuring canopy closure, I was just telling about the farmers in Rwanda. It's your input in your planting station is so important that it's quality input, because everything else is geared, or everything is geared to give you the right spacing, the right growth, to give you canopy closure, okay, which also plays out towards maximum yield. There's experiments that they do with crop density. You know, if the plants are not close enough, your yield is low because space is wasted. They're too far apart. When we go too far the other way, we put plants too close together and they overcompete for available nutrients, sunlight, moisture, and they're thin. There's many plants, but the total yield, because each cob is small, is lower. So there's a middle point on the graph, right? Few plants, too many, right? For any given crop. This is yield. This is number of plants, right? Yield is here. Maximum yield is when we have the right number of plants. You don't have to worry about what is the right number, because we have a field guide, we have a trainer's reference guide, we have a vegetable guide. They have already, in being a guide, they have given you those numbers. Sometimes you can adjust a little bit one way or the other. With maize, I wouldn't. With some other vegetables, because some cabbages have big heads, some have small heads, some have different patterns, you can do some of this adjusting. Now, you plan your whole garden, you put all your planting stations in, Everything is meant to work as a system, work together, so that if you have the right input, your plant grows very well. But imagine if you do all that work and you put weak input. Your manure is old, decomposed, or you put quarter or half. What will happen? Every plant is spaced correctly, but they're all small and weak. So what will happen? You get low yield, but many other things will happen to affect your productivity. Sunlight will start to reach, and always reach, between the plants because they don't close the canopy. So what happens when sunlight starts hitting the ground more often? More evaporation, even though we have blankets, some more evaporation. Germination of weeds, because they now see the sun, that triggers them to germinate, okay? Warmer soil, which is less conductive to good plant growth. So you see that not only do you not get what you want, you start getting other things which you don't want. It both happen. Less yield, more problems. So actually, remember our graph? So yield starts to go down, and expenses start to rise. So then, as soon as yield starts to drop below expenses, those are now losses. So you can do all the work of farming God's way, clearing, mulching, digging the planting stations. Everything's perfectly squared, looks amazing, but your plant is small because you didn't care about your input. That means you didn't leverage what you did. You get the idea of leveraging, right? A lever does more work than you put into it, right? People know very well, mechanics know very well, when they want to get the engine out of the car, they put a pole in there, get a whole bunch of guys on one end, get it out. Okay? So we want to leverage all that we do through good input. So really, if you follow this canopy closure is really, it's not like a goal, it's actually the result of doing everything else that we've told you to do. So you can say, oh, I hope I get canopy closure, I hope I get canopy closure. Chris said I should concentrate on this. Yes, true. But really, it's a product of doing good layout, good blanket, proper spacing. Make sure you put all the right input in the soil, weeding, everything, so that at the end of the day, you get good crop growth, maximum use of sunshine, good shading of weeds, and you reach this pinnacle here. Okay? So really this canopy cover is a product of following instructions. Okay, it's a product of following instructions. Then permanence, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because basically we talked about this in high standards. High standards gives us all the measurements, gives us our permanent pegs in the field, which is all geared towards permanence. And we discussed the benefits of permanence. Less work digging the holes, more fertility build up in the rows, compaction only between the rows, less weed growth because we're not digging in different places, okay? So really, these at the end are mostly products of doing the other things correctly. Okay, you'll get them when you do follow the instructions. Okay, I think my session's taking a bit longer than scheduled, but I think it was useful. The questions were good. Okay, so you can really see it's really farming. We're not just sort of throwing around some ideas. We really want a practice. So really, it guides. What you have found is that you're going to be guided from A to Z in farming. You've got something to do, specific tasks to do, from dry season all the way to harvest and even post-harvest. So we have not left anything undone. The worst thing you can do is start inserting your own ideas. Some of my worst farmers are people who think they know better. Some of the best farmers are people who just say, oh, I don't know this, they told me this, so I'll do it. And they follow everything, and they get the benefit. It's like following God. The simple, poor lady, widow, who obeys God faithfully, even though she has no degree, has the same benefit of being close to God as someone who's been to Bible college. Yes, Bible college is good, it has its purposes, but they all benefit because if they follow and obey God. As soon as one of them starts putting their own ideas, they get into trouble. Okay? Again, we're not forcing you to do farming God's way. If you find another way that you think is better, that's fine. But to give farming God's way a go, you must follow all the steps because it's designed as a farming system. And I would say even bigger than that, it's a way of life. It's a way of life. We try to give you actually a bigger picture. Yes?
Once again, as I said yesterday, I'm not a farmer.
Yeah.
This thing of input. What
Yeah.
could be my input? What are these inputs?
So the
After the soda ash, what are the inputs?
So the inputs are, so that's the food that we're going to give to the plant. So the food that we can give are, let's help her. What have we listed? So ash we don't really count as an input, but yes, it is in some way, but yeah. One input is manure, and then within manure we have any type of manure.
Yes.
Sheep, goat, cow, chicken, those are all inputs under manure. Okay, let's remember another one.
Ash or lime.
Ash or lime. So again, I'm not really counting those as inputs.
Yeah.
We'll put them as their own category because eventually they can be done away with. We're really talking about the food. The ash and the lime leverage the food.
And that manure, is it fresh manure?
Yes, fresh manure. It needs to be fresh.
Okay. just
Without
fresh.
bedding in it.
Okay.
Yeah, we discussed this yesterday.
Compost.
Yeah. Compost, and not any old compost, but Farming God's Way compost made in the way that we teach in Farming God's Way. So compost, you can write, but Farming God's Way compost. Other people, they make funny things and we don't know the result. Compost. So there is inorganic or chemical fertilizer. That's also an input. Sorry, oh, you said organic? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So you can write the chemical fertilizers commonly used in agriculture in Kenya would be diammonium phosphate, commonly known as DAP. You can write DAP. No, not as an input. NPK is another one. That's simply balanced nutrients. That's more for vegetables.
Urea.
I'm not going to use those right now as inputs. Those are, right now I'm classifying these ones that go in the hole. Okay? And then anthill soil, thank you. Yeah. Then some people have listed a couple of other things which we add to maize later while it's growing. That is urea. Urea is like this. Urea. Okay, depending on your accent. That is usually 4000. Don't mind the numbers right now. You just want to ask in the shop for this. The bag will likely have these numbers on it. Then there's CAN, calcium ammonium nitrate. It's again having, it's a form of nitrogen. I don't know the numbers of those offhand. 36, it could be different numbers, but CAN, some people call it CAN. These two are used to feed the maize plant from the top later on. Yeah. But really, for the poor, we're mainly concentrating on those things that go in the hole, and yes, usually organic because it's what they have. Okay? I think we need to go to the next session.